Now the news. One man named his duck-billed platypus Harold, but realizing the enforced illusionary balance demanded within a reality of odd-numbered dimensions, he then named his Harold duck-billed platypus. That is, until his mother walked past his room and called out to him, "I told you to keep that thing in your pants, young man." And he cried back, "Ah, Ma, that's my Johnson, not my Harold." And she shouted over her shoulder as she kept walking, "I don't care how many flavors they serve, I still want you to keep that thing zipped up where it belongs." And he was left to sit there, reflecting once again on the completely predictable nature and totally unreliable reality of what occurs in life once it is reported on and talked about. And in obvious nonverbal agreement therewith, his platypus, purred. One man struck oil, struck it in his abdomen, gushed up to his head, tried to cap it off. No use. Let it go. No use. Let it flow. Yay, we're all friggin' billionaires. But one strange man said he wanted his poverty back. Have I mentioned lately to you news hounds that this is all about the mind, no matter what it sounds as though we're speaking about? One man said, "You know what I hate about going to sleep at night? The uncontrollable dreams I have. You know what I hate about my daytime consciousness? The same thing." And Morpheus considered sicking a thunderbolt on him, then figured, nah, why shoot his own troops? In one life, one man was a horse. In the next, he was a rider. Then in the next, a horse again. Then in the one after that, he was a rider once more, and so on like that throughout the day. "Hey, you, give me that crop." "Hey, who you calling a crop?" The curious nature of captivity on one distant world. Over there, if you think that you're being held in the northern district, you are. And if you think you're being held in the southern district, then you are. And if you think you're being held in the eastern district, you are. And same being true for the western as well. Is this not highly curious? Well, of course, unless you've visited there yourself and have a personal feel for what's going on there. One man had a disease. It wasn't fatal, but he worried over it so intensely that it adversely affected his life. So he tried to quit thinking about it. And for long periods of time, he wouldn't. But then he'd always think about it again. And now when he did, he was bothered even more by the fact that he was now not worrying about it all of the time. I ask you now, friends and aficionados of self-pitying, what's a poor mind to do? Except see the rice for what it is and make it stay right where it is, and voila, no more voila. The reason you never hear of the universe's most famous explorers is that they're all murdered at the moment of their discovery. Count on it. Put it in your pocket, take it to the bank. Invest it in a cure, then forget it ever happened. What's a poor mind to do, other than what a rich man makes it do? Every day one man would beat himself up, and not just once, but often, many times a day. This ultimately proved to be of such great benefit that he quit doing it. All right, bailiff, call the next case. Yes, Your Honor, it's the people versus themselves. Hold on there. Is that all of the people? Yes, Your Honor, I'm afraid so. All of the people. Except, of course, for the you know whose. Oh, that's right. I nearly forgot about them. That's okay, Your Honor. So did they. Nearly. Every day do men beat themselves, not physically, but in a way even worse, from a certain view, by a certain few. And I don't mean psychiatrists and civilian neurotics. Stopping it proved to be of such personal benefit that one man did. Now, close up court for the day, if not longer. In the higher elevations of an isolated land was once a mystical school divided into 3 parts, each set on its own separate mountaintop. At the first branch, they taught such and such to be true, while at the second, they said that such and such was specifically untrue, and at the third, students were told that they must learn to reconcile the contradiction. And once a man had accomplished this, it was revealed to him the existence of a secret 4th outpost atop the range's highest peak, to which he'd be taken and thrown there from. You ever think about the money mystics save on graduation knickknacks? A person got married and named their spouse same old shit. And things worked out even better than imagined, in that locally there were no prohibitions regarding incest. One cannibal said, "I may be lacking in good taste, but at least I dine only on myself." I guess he thinks that exculpatory. Then again, men find anything they can think of to say about anything they do a reasonable to them explanation. Okay. One cannibal said, "I may be lacking in good taste, but at least I dine only on myself." I guess he thinks that exculpatory. Then again, men find anything they can think of to say about anything they do a reasonable explanation to them. After all, remember, the very last thing God said to Adam as he ushered him from the garden was, "Now don't you forget to talk when necessary, or even just convenient. Now get out of here, you hairy little rascal, you." There was once a man who went alone into a dark cave to meditate. There was once another man who brought a dark cave into himself to effect the same end. Then there was this dark cave whose activities I wanted to tell you about. One man concluded, since emotions are fake, I'll fake my emotions. Later in his bio, he named that period of his life, "What a Relief." There was once a mystical order who summed up their complete approach in the 3-word directive, "Quick, don't move," of whose brevity they were quite proud. But they learned of another school who also had a 3-word maxim. So the first group changed theirs to simply, "Don't move," only to hear of yet another order who had a 2-word shibboleth also. So, to retain their leadership in this area, they shortened their guiding principle to the one word, "Now." One man suddenly had this idea, that his efforts to shift around what was happening in his head would be more likely of success if he could have new eyes implanted in his head, so that he would no longer see everything as he always did. I don't know about you, but I like that. Now, one man decided that everyone else in the world was going too slow, so he decided to begin racing. But he raced in a rut. When you're in a dark, locked room and someone asks where you are, it's hard to say. Now, one man decided that if he couldn't start doing more of what he knew he should be doing, that he'd kill himself, which of course, doing what he should be doing would accomplish anyway. Now, one man had a ghost who traveled with him. He learned to ignore it. A poem regarding certain people's certain suspicions. Yes, it could. Yes, it could. Ah, indeed. Yes, it could. Ask yourself why it could. Why it could. Why it could. Ask yourself, yes, indeed, why it could. The sad but true tale of one man's futile, mystical quest. He couldn't stop juggling. There's this place that, even after you've been there, it's good to have a different map every time to get back. And now the sad but true tale of one man's futile mystical quest. Hey, we just did that one, didn't we? The one that said cause he couldn't quit juggling or something like that. One frustrated man rode a merry-go-round until he was ready to shoot the horse out from under himself. But then ran upon the problem of his mind being the only weapon available, and it having too good a time, apparently, to go along with the plan. Up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Are you describing the endless cycle of man's birth and death? Up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. One man had a particularly adversarial relationship with inanimate objects and concluded that it was due to their static status within an ever-changing active environment. Then eventually began to see it as arising from him being mentally inert within an otherwise dynamic reality. The children showed hand puppets. The children showed hand shadows on the wall. They sure showed that, but that wasn't all. Words. Words are like freight cars in a train of thought. Words are like individual ants in an army on the move. Words are like whitecaps on an endless sea of waves. Words, once started, are difficult to stop, in case you hadn't noticed. In one city, a new health problem has appeared. There's a small puzzle that children can swallow, which ends up on their outsides, causing later life difficulties like you wouldn't believe. Well, yeah, you would believe, but for reasons we won't go into. But the theatrics made it sound nice, plus drew attention away from the reasons I mentioned that we weren't going into. There was once a gang of cosmic cowboys who drifted from one world to another, and who eventually developed saddle sores in an area opposite from where you'd expect. Did I mention that they were mental cowboys, bouncing from one faceless little town and irrelevant idea to another, then back again, only to ricochet off, to return again, and on their travels go. As he knelt down by the campfire, looking over the material spread before him, one sidewinder mused, "Perhaps I could extricate myself from this place if I would thoroughly piss on these worthless maps." And a voice injected, "Don't you mean to say if you could come up with some new maps? Destroying the present ones would surely serve no useful purpose." And the sidewinder was sorely tempted to piss on the voice. A past mystical order, of law enforcement leanings perhaps, had as its core approach this warning: no false moves. There are two main ways to go about trying to become better conscious, and neither one of them is talking about it. And one guy said, "See, I told you to shut up." "No," he replied, "I told you to shut up." "Not likely," he retorted. "I told you to shut up." "Didn't? I'm the one who told you." "Didn't? Did? Didn't? Did? Why the hell don't you just shut the hell up?" Yes, there are two main ways to go about most anything, and you've just witnessed two of the ways not to. I mean, two. And one man decided, no matter what you're saying, if you're talking, you're barking up the wrong tree stump. And his cousin asked him why he said tree stump instead of tree, as would be expected in such a sentence. And he replied to his brother's boy by kicking him in the crotch while asking if that was high enough up the oak to satisfy him. Apparently attempting to indicate that his original phrasing carried some metaphorical significance. A lot the kid cared under the circumstances. So, sighed a guy. So, sighed a guy. The God sure hated the mystics. And a bystander asked why he said that, and the guy replied, if you was a mystic, you wouldn't have to ask.
Yeah.
But hey, if you think that's rough, chew on this. How come you never seen retirement homes for the awakened? No old folks facilities for the limber and liberated? Is there no justice in the world? I hope not. Ooh, I surely do. While sometimes some men have certain songs they favor with certain dances, everyone has their own list of favorite songs and favorite dances, none of which need have any relationship to one another. A man intent on leaving the local ballroom has, as his most effective option, the possibility of shooting the singer and then sliding out the door. One man said, I dreamed I died and went to allegory heaven, where I found nothing but dead allegories. Ah, sweet heaven at last. There is nothing quite so bracing to an ex-ballroom dancer than the feel to the face of a cold hardwood floor. Ah, at last, no more dreams. Thoughts. If you keep thinking the same things, you'll keep thinking the same things. If you keep using the same ingredients, you'll keep cooking the same dishes. If you keep using the same bait, you'll keep catching the same fish. But hey, what do you expect? Hey, when you going to wise up? New maps aren't just good for going to new places. They're also to be used to escape from old ones. One man had a camera implanted in his head to film everything he did, but then he'd neglect to watch the film. Although unaware of it, the ordinary think of life as mission impossible, while a man who has become familiar with its operations simply tries not to think about it. Try it. Your feet will thank you for it. Dancing in the dark, la-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. One man lived in a most curious house. Whenever something inside went wrong and he'd call for outside help to come fix it, it'd make things worse. It took him a long time to realize this was happening. It's taking even longer for him to figure out some way to describe this to anyone else. On one world, immediately after a child is born, life discreetly lays by its bed a phone card that says, when in need, call someone. Anyone, but call someone. That's the normal way. The guy on the ground at the bottom of the ladder continued to cut off rungs and throw them to the guy on the roof to install where they were missing on top. On a faraway star was once a race whose view evolved to this: the only way that anything can be fixed is to leave it alone. If you don't depend on anything, you don't have to seek independence. The ordinary exercise and evidence their intelligence by commenting on the external world of events. Only mystics do on man's internal states. And from a fresh stack of military press releases, The World of Thought and the Battle for the Skies. Flown unmanned, one man began to picture his mind as a stupidity-seeking missile. Available as two distinct ways to look at having an invisible companion who travels with you throughout your life. One way is to look at it like I just described it, and the other is not to look at it at all. In my book, invisible companions get what they deserve, if you're lucky. And a cry was heard, either let me off this train or let this train off of me. I don't care which, you son of a bitch. And he replied by reminding himself that he should not talk to himself. Just about then, that peculiar railroad doctor came through the car, recommending that all who could no longer tolerate the ride, not to tolerate it any longer. A notion that set more than well with a few, them seeming hesitant and only not knowing immediately what to do. Jump, he shouted. Jump, damn it, now. When in bed at night, just before falling asleep, one man began to have this idea that if, while in the middle of a dream, he could instantly wake up, that it might have beneficial consequences. He says that he has hesitated to mention this to anyone for fear they'd ask him why he doesn't try the same thing during the daylight hours. He assures us that the world is simply bursting with such smart mouths. For years, one man searched for the big treasure, and all along the way kept discovering small ones, which he'd tell people about. Well, one day he finally found the big one. But do you think he ever mentioned it to anybody? Not hardly. And why, you may ask? Hey, ask him. And hey, you kids in the back, quit talking to yourselves and sticking your minds up your heads. Now stop it. You hear me? In one town, the word went round that the merry-go-round had been booby-trapped. You think that stopped people from riding it? Think again, you rube. You're sure not from around here. One man, finally, backed himself into an absolutely inescapable corner and said, well, finally, and jumped. No matter what views, no matter what apparent approaches, cultures, language, in which people have been involved or will ever be involved based upon the structure of humans presently, there is a common problem, a problem challenge, amongst those I could say, but a specific one. That is the attempt to absolutely lose your mind while not going crazy. Very colloquial terminology, I grant you, but it represents something quite real, and in a way that no one ordinarily ever gives notice to. Much of the world's fantasy literature, much of the world's allegorical literature, even the world's sedate, serious religions have stories, notions, hints, references to this fact. The ordinary mind cannot perceive what's going on. Because if it did, it would be, in a sense, doing damage to itself. It would be, in one real sense, sipping on poison. But a person can have a good notion of what this is about. A person can have a good notion or have a good dose, more than one dose, of experience in it. But inasmuch as it is a continuing process, inasmuch as there is no real graduation day, inasmuch as the further you go along with it, the more there is to it, inasmuch as you never get to the terminus of it, as long as you are active, as long as you do not simply fall into a coma in a new area, as long as you have not spent all your effort to go 1,000 miles down the road and pass out again, as long as you do not fall victim to that, then there is no end to it. But at a particular point, sooner or later, in their own ways, based upon their own language and their own culture, it comes down to this common challenge that I foster on you tonight. And that is, in a quite valid operational sense, the question of how to lose your mind without going crazy. There were several news items tonight that referred to the matter of maps. One of them said that there is a place, even after which you've been there, new maps are useful, if not necessary, every time you revisit. And then, of course, was a story about the sidewinder looking at the map spread out before him by the campfire and saying that he might be able to extricate himself from where he found himself, considering the possibility that he might totally saturate, just piss all over the maps. And of course, a voice injected, countered, and attempted to correct him, thinking that he surely meant something other than that. It's simply destroying present maps, even if it was not included in the news item. And since I happened to be there when the news item was written, I know that it could have said, destroying present maps, no matter their questionable value. But destroying whatever you have with nothing else to replace it could not be seen as beneficial from any reasonable view. Mere words, bullshit, warm piss. But it seems to make sense. It makes sense to psychiatrists, it makes sense to sociologists, it makes sense even, if I may say so, to people in the judicial system and people who drive automobiles as chauffeurs, and some people who work in gardens. That if you told them, or if you asked them, what's your take on life mentally, and they said, somewhat lacking. Well, you asked, to what degree? Well, you know how funny people who work out of doors talk. Well, that and chauffeurs being around all that carbon in the air all day. But if you ask them, well, how would you rate your degree of internal satisfaction? And I, again, would submit that all of them would say fairly low. Not at all up to my high standards, not at all as I look forward to in my earlier days. But if you ask a man, if you narrowed it down so that I can narrow it down right quick, if you ask ordinary people, that if their view of life, there's no great importance, I don't guess, to this, except to give us somewhere to, another diving board from which to jump, ordinary people, well, I'll admit, as I've established, or you should be able to see, that ordinary people with ordinary minds are never satisfied. That is the basic, that is the inescapable, radical definition of being sane and ordinary, is that you're mentally dissatisfied. Only people who are judged by the rest of humanity, who are, by the way, the final judge in such matters, if the collective of humanity hears that some man says, oh, I'm satisfied, there's not a thing within me I would change. I am perfect. It is all to my complete satisfaction. I can't believe you asked. Then the majority, as you know, will take one of two courses. They will either shun him And if he does not seem to be given to being shunned, they will shun him forcefully. In other words, he's considered out of the norm. So to be norm, there's nothing unusual about that. To be in the norm, within certain ranges that seem to, the ranges vary here and there, but to no importance, but within a range established by the majority, within that range, any ordinary person who belongs in the majority, who needs to be considered part of them, is dissatisfied. So then if you ask ordinary people, are they dissatisfied mentally? Are they satisfied with their view of life? Are they satisfied with the model they have of life? Are they satisfied with their understanding of why humans operate? Are they satisfied? If they would take it to be a fairly provocative question, if they would give it some serious attention, they would say, well, no. Even people who are upholders of some religious faith. If you said, well, I know that you're a good churchgoer and blah, 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 no offense, but does your religion, does the paradigm of your gospels, does your explanations, even according supposedly from the holy mouth, the mouth of a deity itself, does it actually to you, just between you and me, does it satisfy you? Does it answer all the questions? Do you now look at life and go, oh yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I can accept that. Any ordinary person will say no. If you then suggested, well, if you went further and you say, well, I've been doing a survey and I cannot find anyone on this planet who feels other than you do. The people in high offices, people who are in leadership positions in religions, in education, etc., they're in the same position as you. They're not satisfied with any of the models, even world experts, men who have studied this in their professional life. Then this ordinary person would not be all that surprised. He might feel somewhat vindicated. Oh, well, that's good to know. And if you said, well, does that not offer the possibility that if we're talking about people, and you might say to the man you're talking to, I don't know what that says, but you might say that to him. And of course, he was a friendly sort, he might go, oh. You might say to the man, well, you're well read. It's obvious that you have read the Greek, the pre-Socratic Egyptian and Chinese philosophers. It's obvious that you're a student of political systems, various and sundry economic models, religions. You're obviously a student of comparative religion. Would we not be safe, since I tell you that I have done extensive polling and I find that your view of being dissatisfied with the model's explanations is world held, then would we not conclude? Well, we could say that all men are idiots, but I don't see that that's a valid statement. We've got no reason to say that, and believe me, he would agree to that. You know, well, let's move on. So the other possibility is that the maps, the models, the explanations, the information itself has always been lacking, continues to be lacking, has never been anything but lacking, no matter from what quarter it came, no matter the source, no matter if it was called religious, philosophical, scientific, sociological, biological. And he would agree to that. An ordinary sane man who even passes the minimal standards for thinking would have to agree when it was put to him that way, that yes, either we are, if it's not an innate shortcoming on man's part intellectually, which again, you know he's not going to admit, because, and not just to make a cheap joke, that would accomplish nothing. If man admitted that, it would stop everything. So it has to be the explanations, it has to be the information. Then if you went, I forget how you do it, you know, trying to look reflective and if you did that and go, well, how about this? You know, in that case, if we've had 5,000 or 6,000 years here, and we've had models ranging from those that are deifically based to those that are centered around humanism, if we have attempted models that claim to be absolutely materialistic and scientific, we have those that purport to be totally spiritual, etc. If we've had this full range all of this time, and none of them are really any more satisfying than the other, would we not be tempted then to ask this question, which no one seems to want to, but since you're so intelligent, I thought I'd bring the matter up with you. Plus, when I was going, I just thought about it. What if there is a serious intrinsic flaw in the way, or in the information itself? There's not a good way to put this verbally. But if you said, what if, the ordinary mind would discount this I'm not sure I should stop and point that out, but catch on. Ordinary intelligence of anybody would discount this because it has gone so far afield, it has gone outside the bounds of binary thought. Because what you're saying now is that there is in some way an inherent flaw either in man's thinking, which you and this other man has already established that can't be the case, or then you've got to say there is some indigenous error, some shortcoming that cannot be overcome in the information that men come up with. See, there's no way to put this, because to get the mind to go along with this, enough for me to try to throw it in a rabbit trap, the mind has got to be able to separate information, as it calls. It's got to be able to, I guess you'd say nowadays, separate the software from the hardware. You've got to separate the ideas from man's intelligence, from his mind, which the mind can't do. But if you'll try to follow this a second, if you'd present to the man and say, well, now the mind can go this far. Make sure, or do my best that you know what I'm pointing toward, that we've already established that you and this guy, me and this guy talking, that all of the models known, being prejudicial, neither favorably or otherwise to any particular model, any particular area, it's just that all of the explanations of life, all the explanations of humanity and life are lacking, and that you and he are well read enough that you agree, yeah, we know we have enough information that none of them, they're all about the usefulness, the validity that I feel that they offer is about equal. None's any better or worse than the other. So you've agreed that there is none. Surveying 6,000 years of recorded history, there are no good explanations. They're just not. They're all about the same. They're not good. They do not explain anything. But then to try to say, well, all of that has an inherent flaw, that's when the mind breaks down, because you're now taking all of this, which is strewn over 6,000 years from a multitude of conflicting cultures, views, attitudes, peoples, etc., and trying to say that in some way information or knowledge, you can call it anything you want to, it's ideas, that ideas have a flaw. And see, that's what the mind can't, because the mind will say, well, all right, well, that's possible, which ideas? And you have to say, no, not which ideas. Ideas. And the mind, well, some of you see or you must feel it, the mind will go, wait a minute, I was with you, but all right, I agree, we agreed that all these models and stuff have some flaw in it, even if we can't figure out what it is. And then I say, no, not just these models, not these explanations, not just these and not any others. What if all ideas, what if all explanations have an inherent flaw? That is, all ideas are inherently flawed and cannot be cured, but there's an inherent flaw in all human knowledge. And the guy would go, well, okay, I agree that we're up to that point, but are you specifically talking about, again, about those models we were, the Greek, no. Not specific ideas, ideas. And all the mind can do, it could rhetorically finally go, all right, you're saying that all of human thought, that whenever we think, that all thinking is flawed. And I say, yeah. He might go that far and go, oh, it makes no sense. I mean, just literally, there's nothing the mind can do with that. Facts can be flawed if you can prove them one way or the other. If they are evidentially available, you can prove 2 and 2 is 4, or 2 rocks and 2 rocks are 4 rocks, or you can prove that 2 rocks and 2 rocks are not 5 rocks. And you can prove if somebody is calling the capital of Poland Warsaw, you can go see what it's called. You can go look. Anyway, you can prove a fact. And the guy would say, the mind, represented by this guy, will say, that's true. And if I say, nah, it's all information. What if all information, all ideas are flawed? That the mind cannot do. Now back to something more promising. People involved with such as this, I suggest to you that everyone, it's obvious once you see it. Once you experience it and you, to a certain degree, you'll see it everywhere, so to speak. In other words, things that you already have thought about or heard about that you didn't even really pay much attention to, you will understand what I said, that the history of humanity, and specifically the history of activities such as this, is strewn with expressions of this, one way or the other. And that is that you get to the point, and it's not just a matter now of saying, well, I wish I could turn off this playback. I wish I could just stop the noise. Yeah, that's always an available view. But at the times, as long as when you're going through the periods, the noise will not stop. As all of you have found, it is not such an easy job to turn it off. It's not such an easy job to just ignore it. Then I suggest the time will come eventually that you look at all of the efforts. Did you say all? A-double-L. Which is, well, it's hard enough because you can't start looking at it all. But that you'll begin to question whether all, or if you prefer any, or all of your efforts are being hindered or might be more promising. Could you break away from the thinking you have of what you're attempting to do? In other words, if you could absolutely wipe your mind clean of ideas, not wipe your mind clean of the sense of putting you in another state of consciousness and turning off the playback, not in that sense, because right now the only reason I'm bringing this up is for the periods in which most people live most of the time, including the mystics, wherein they're not in the kind of state that takes no effort. They're not in that kind of state of conscious bliss. I guess religious people would put it that way. But where it requires no effort to be what you want to be. The rest of the time, you're struggling one way or the other. Or else you're back asleep, you're back in a coma. But the struggle, I submit, that will finally strike you. And I know for a fact that some of you it's hit one way close to this already, long before now. But it strikes you that there you are, working whatever it was. I hate to waste time dragging out examples, but here it is that you're back doing something, your mind, you catch yourself all tied up, arguing with somebody, fighting with ghosts again, fighting with that which is irrelevant, fighting with that which is not even there, except it's in you, and it's in there, and you realize, well, here I am fighting with it again, and there's all sorts of offshoots of that. One is, you realize, why the hell I keep fighting it? Nothing changes. I've been fighting, and imagine I've been struggling with this since I was 12 years old. And I did it last week. I did it last hour. I did it a minute ago. Nothing has changed. Why do I keep doing it? Not only that, you can shift it over. Why do I keep doing it? Because I look at it, and the outcome, even if the outcome did change, it's meaningless. It would do nothing for me. Which those of you who are listening good, that's kind of cheating, because if you could actually do that, it changes everything. But at any rate, it sounds okay. Well, it is okay. It is a fair description of what goes on. I'm just saying if literally what I said, if it got to the point that you understood what was going on internally was irrelevant, then all of this is irrelevant. We could be out there having a beer and dancing the boogaloo. Whatever happened to the boogaloo, damn it? That's what happened to this country. First they banned the tango, and then they told all the kids, that boogaloo doesn't look right to me. It's just absolutely shocking, the moral decay. And Finland was once such a great, well, at any rate, don't get me started. By the way, now I mentioned that due to the sudden drop in the weather after we leave, I'd appreciate if someone would, in fact, help me get started, because my battery, I was having trouble even getting over here. I submit that the time will finally come. I waited. I think some of your minds wandered off into a Helsinki 24-hour tango palace, and you didn't want to react. You were... Folks, it's cold out there, especially if you don't have a die-hard battery. That I was going to submit to you, that rather that if it will hit you one way or the other, the distinct possibility, and let me put it that way tonight, most of you are going to hear through it anyway, but the distinct possibility that there you are, perhaps you've, to be understandable, that you think using some of the terms I've used, that I've made up or that I took somewhere, or that you're using terms, and you don't even think about it, because to think you've got to use terms, you have to use words. And so you do not think about every word, especially words that seem to have some potentially, if not provable in the past, extraordinary usefulness to you. Now you would certainly assume somebody that's been around this for any length of time would be past the point of having any interest in words that are, to put it simply, without stopping here and getting stuck with it, that play no part in intelligence, that play no part in a man being more conscious. That'd be all kinds of hostile talk, all kinds of critical talk that you at least understand if the playback's going on in you and it's going rah, 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 and bitching them, you know, shaking your fist at people, at least you know that's, all I can do is try to ignore it, try to stop it. You're not even entangled with that. So it's not a problem of that there's some, it's not a selective problem in that area. But notice, if I mention it to you, everyone would say, if you didn't think it was a trick, if I said, well, do you agree, even though words are, from one view, useless, and they're on the same level, they're the same quality, which is nothing, you understand you shouldn't be going around killing people verbally. Not for any moralistic or religious reason, but you shouldn't be doing that. You should be killing you. You shouldn't be involved with critical thought. I just put it simply. Anything that fits into critical, any kind of complaint, you shouldn't be doing it. And I'll assume, but now you'd all go, yeah, I know that. I can just feel it. And if I say, well, you are on the lookout for it, you'd go, oh, yeah. Oh, hell yeah. Well, I can bitch for the best of them. I'm always watching it. But then if I said, well, did you ever watch the other end of the verbal neural spectrum? Do you ever watch what you think about that you should be trying to observe yourself, or you should be trying to be conscious in the moment? You should be trying, in other words, the kind of things that I would sit here and say on a given night. The kinds of things that you would, when you're in a warm, fairly conscious moment, the kind of thing that seems to be the part of your consciousness that is trying to fight the good battle, that is trying to struggle for some other form of consciousness, for some expansion of your understanding. That part you don't normally question. Whatever the terms, whatever the words you use, you do not question it, because it's, up until now, as far as you can tell, everything being do-si-do and vis-a-vis, everything being push and shove, everything being binary, then you think that you got all these ideas that are obviously of no use, all kinds of criticism, all kinds of complaints, that they're obviously of no help. You just pass that point. Oh yeah, get to the point. I go, okay. But then over here you have the ideas that put generally, even though we agree beforehand, that, or I'll assume you would agree in theory. If I say all words are just bullshit, it's just noise and it doesn't matter, you go, okay. But as long as the noise is going on, you're not free from it, you have to put some value, you have to give some notice to what tends to go hand in hand with certain ideas, certain modes of thought. Okay. Now I say, all right, do you pay any attention? Now you stay on the lookout probably of insulting words and hostile words and religious slurs, racial slurs, just hate. You're probably on the lookout for that. Oh yeah, it goes on. It just plays back sometime in my head. But oh yeah, I'll watch that. Now I'm careful not to let it drag me with it. Okay, good. Now how about nice metaphysical type words, mystical terminology, Buddha mind or whatever strikes you, or being awake, struggling for the great mystical enlightenment. Oh yeah. Well, there's no doubt. Vis-a-vis, do-si-do, don't dance when I'm talking. It seems like any doubt, no one even questions it, that the latter sorts of terms, as long as the mind's playing back, that is better. Without any doubt, you wouldn't even question it. You'd think, well, it's a trick, get to the point. Certainly it's better that I'm thinking about being more conscious, being enlightened, being tolerant, being more alert. All of that's better than me thinking about things like, I wish I could kill them. I wish those people were dead. Boy, I wish I could get my hands on my first wife. I wish my mother was still alive and I'd kill her. Yeah, I know the words have got to be better. That those kind of ideas have got to be not just better to people involved with such as this, not just comparably better, but almost incomparably better. That it's not even the same ballpark. Well, what have they done for you lately? People end up, after it's going on now, but you end up being aware of the fact that even after you know what this is about, you'll end up struggling and fighting against things internally on a selective basis. It's what I'm talking about right now, even if you don't call it selective basis. And I tried to bring you around the back of the wagon trains so we could slip up on the circle, that you're being selective by thinking, well, thoughts about being more conscious are better thoughts, they're better ideas than me thinking, how could I be a bigger rat's ass? How could I be a bigger son of a bitch? That it's certainly better than me thinking about how could I be more conscious? How could I be more insightful? That's better. Okay, well, all right. It certainly seems so, but let me ask you this. What have they done for you lately? And you got to finally realize nothing. But that does not deny the fact that you still, God, I can't believe I'm going to say should. I'll leave it to you. That you should be thinking, if you got to think one or the other, you should be thinking thoughts about being more enlightened than you should about you wish your mother was alive so that you could kill her. You can take should for what it's worth. I deny I said it. I don't, you shouldn't do this or that. But if you should see, just between us, you should see it that way. But why? I suggest again, the day will come that you'll see it in a certain way. And I don't mean that this is something that becomes all-consuming for all times, although I'm not saying it's not. That all of your best thoughts, all of your best methods, all of the best ideas you've ever had, all of the best tricks that you found in private, all the tricks you may have picked up from someplace else, that at times is given to you demonstratively, or has operated in you beneficially to a demonstrative degree, that they actually had an effect as far as you're concerned, some term you read, or maybe something you came up with yourself, like, wait a minute, and I don't really want to make up anything, but you're noticing one of the processes, just the ordinary life inside of your head, and you go, and I keep doing, and I struggle, wait a minute, what if what's going on instead of is what if I saw that, and it could be? What if I looked at it and it was then what I'm doing, and it helps. You get something out of it for an hour, a minute, a second. Not only, and if you think I'm cutting it too thin, that does not cut down on the effect it has, because even if it is just a momentary, that does not mean that it may not stick with you for years, that you keep digging that thing back out. It's like pulling out, I started to say a rubber you used 40 or 50 times, but that's too crude. That's far too crude. Let me do something. It's like pulling out a prayer. That's it. A prayer, or perhaps a holy chant that at one time worked. That one time you prayed to the gods and used this one prayer. And at one time it worked just for a second. And now you keep pulling that son of a bitch out, and it's 20 years later. And I got news for you. If you think that you bore easily, the gods, they'll take a message from you one time. It takes an alert person to understand this. They may, well, you know there's no guarantee of that, they may take your call once, a particular call, that is like a prayer, or hey, can I ask you something? They may take it that way, or would you do so-and-so? They may answer one time. But if you send that same call, you're going to end up being religious. You're going to understand. You're going to use. You're going to be a full participant in that grand word, faith, because you're going to keep doing something that has no effect. If that be true, what I'm saying is you can even find something on your own that has an effect, a beneficial effect. And you can continue to try to use it the rest of your life and never notice that. All right, we got 2 minutes. I'll be more truthful. You can notice. I should be giving you credit. You do notice. Not all the time, but I was hoping that tonight may make you notice more that there are things that you continue to do and you're not aware of the fact that they have no effect, because they seem to at least have the effect of bringing your attention back to heel at the moment. That you go, whatever it is, that you go, well, I won't stare, since I gave you that you keep thinking, all right, I won't stare. God, that was useful. The first time I ever heard that, and I went, it was like, I can't remember, but I went that whole first day. I bet I drove people crazy. People were looking at me on the street. I'm just sure they were, but and I thought, this is it. This would take me through anything. Never mind great mystical, occult, metaphorical literature. If I could go through life and never stare again. And so now, when you're in times that you just feel like you're desperate, and you get up and, like in the morning or whenever it is, and it's like, I'm so groggy, I can't even shake my head back to anything resembling a conscious person. Thinking how close I've been, or that I've actually been downtown Istanbul. And look at me now. Now, I'd be ashamed to compare me with the lowest, dumbest son of a bitch on this planet. Bit of hyperbole, but hey, when you're as stupid as some of us can be, it's deserved by God. No sham humility here, not for us. At any rate, we're running out if you can listen right quick, that you no longer use not staring, let's say. But it has this effect that just to think, well, at least I can do one thing. It's always a great fallback. I won't stare. Yeah. And as far as you can tell, you feel better. You go, at least sometimes I don't know what to do, but by God, I blessed the day I heard about that thing, because that son of a bitch now, I've known it, what, 10 or 15 years, and as long as I remember to do it, that son of a bitch always pulls me back to reality, and at least that never fails. God, I'm glad I heard about it. But you catch the gist, and I'm not trying to come about with irony again, because it is not an unexpected result. But the unexpected, the unnoticed result is that it gives you a sensation that you are doing something other than you were doing a second before of thinking about doing something, but you're not doing anything. But you are now dependent upon the magic of the words, the maps. I submit to you, in conclusion again, until I can bring it back up, the day will come that in one sense, you, like everyone else, goes through that you'll begin to think that of great benefit, to say the least, would be if you could absolutely lose your mind without going crazy. And I got to add this. I assume that sounds sort of neat and would be a good ending. You know, ordinary people, I point this out before, ordinary people all the time worried about losing their mind. And I assume you know what they mean. If you get to a point in this, the possibility of losing your mind is not a fear. You think, God damn if I could just do it. But of course you mean it slightly differently. But losing your mind, my dear friends, is not an easy matter. And a man in the amen's corner said, is he the champion of the understatement or what? Thank you, Brother Riley. Appreciate that.